Conclusion, virtually dead. Videmus nunc per speculum in aenigmate. Tunc autem facie ad faciem, Corinthians 13:12. In the speculations over the digital, with its binary and fluid nature, it is not surprising that the Tao is often borrowed from Oriental philosophy as a parallel. This is a metaphysical and poetic way of thinking and being. It is surprising, however, that although there is a certain amount of speculation of a, shall we say, pragmatic nature as well, that the Confucian systems are not cited as frequently, if at all. It is as if the virtual is being sold as a yin without a yang, or vice versa. Perhaps the Confucian aspect is so established that we should not see the wood for the trees. If the virtual is metaphysical, poetic, and art, we should not forget that the digital had previously been the domain of the other polarity. I believe that the analogies of memory, dreams, imagination, and poetry are all valid with regards virtual reality, and all are the familiar and traditional territory of the artist, whatever the medium. Despite contemporary attempts to shift the role of the artist, i.e. that art is just another job, and thereby shift the notion of art into line with more commercial and corporate values, the eternal return of the artist will be unchanged. Even if art was formerly focused on the appearance of things and their representation, and now it's concerned with systems and coming into being and follows the five-fold path of connectivity, immersion, interaction, transformation, and emergence, always in flux, unstable in structure, undecided in form, uncertain in outcome. A Scott, an interfacial glossary. The human condition is still one of life and death, mortality and transience. The real work of any artist will still be about the tragic realization and expression of love and loss, practically, conceptually, and virtually, and will not be recompensed. You are paid to work for others, not to work for yourself. There are, of course, as Graves would have it, more Apollonian strategies. Death in life in the private domain, life and death in the public. A struggle and inevitably a compromise, if it can be negotiated, between the conscience and the consensus and the filling out of the middle ground. It will be the same old story. Virtual reality may see the birth of a new world, but it will be another dead world. We have gone beyond the age of romance and the heroism of the private evolution and failed to achieve the impossible. All that remains is to achieve a simulated equivalent of success and excess in a public domain that cannot either be heroic or romantic, except nostalgically and fictitiously, and is beyond any sentimental or spiritual value. The something has been replaced by the nothing. We are the dead. The digital world will be the book of the dead. It is the all-new Orphic mystery, and our love will be turned to stone as we dig it up and piece it together. There is nothing to search for but an oblivion that is delayed through distraction. If we look through the mist of time, we are all playing doom. When art becomes independent, represents its world in dazzling colors, a moment of life has grown old and it cannot be rejuvenated with dazzling colors. It can only be evoked in remembrance. The greatness of art only begins to appear at the dusk of life. Guideboard, The Society of the Spectacle. p. 71. But perhaps virtual reality, like drugs, promises a ready-made transcendence, and we will not have to wait for the dusk of life, as there will no longer be a dusk or a dawn of life in asynchronous cyberspace. And if that's the case, who cares? It's all relative, isn't it? I guess we'll just have to evolve beyond the body. Maybe we can do it in a quantum leap. Meanwhile, the excessive mediation of the social, which is carried out through the machinery of the media, increases the intensity of our alienation from the body by fixating the flow of attention on information rather than on direct experience. In this sense, the media serves a religious or priestly role, appearing to offer us a way out of the body by redefining spirit as information. The essence of information is the image, the sacral and iconic data complex, which usurps the primacy of the material bodily principle as the vehicle of incarnation, replacing it with a fleshless ecstasis beyond corruption. Consciousness becomes something which can be downloaded, excised from the matrix of animality and immortalized as information. No longer ghost in the machine, but machine as ghost, machine as Holy Ghost, ultimate mediator, which will translate us from our mayfly corpses to a pleroma of light. Virtual reality as cybergnosis. Jack in, leave Mother Earth behind forever. Hakim Bey, The Information War. The symptoms of consumer society have in general been neurosis and obesity. The cure is probably in a new world order where paranoid schizophrenia is the psychological norm. A sublimated notion of the self in a historically and geographically liberated culture of intellectual nomads. A new conception of the management of resources in time and space. For no fractals, Freud is dead and the myth of the unified individual has been destroyed. We are each made up of many selves, decentered, distributed and teleschizophrenic. Our minds have an infinity of fractals constantly creating alternative realities in which every thread of meaning is woven by us. Telenoia, the old sense of the individual, solitary, anxious, alienated, private, paranoid, was totally distasteful. We celebrate telenoia, telematic consciousness at large, not the paranoia of the old industrial culture. Telematic imperative, when there are no more geographical boundaries, territorial aggression is as irrelevant as polarized politics. The only imperative is to connect. Nowadays even the self is permeable. A Scott, interactive terminology. This would at least be a forward-looking and perhaps even an optimistic conclusion. On the other hand, one might feel that as Pound put it, the whole of great art is a struggle for communication, and this communication is not a leveling, it is not an elimination of differences. It is a recognition of differences. In the end I must agree with Guy Debord when he so eloquently wrote in his Society of the Spectacle, that telecommunications reunites the separate but reunites it as separate. Isn't this not only the likely but also the inevitable bottom line when considering the speculation over the possibilities of digital potential manifesting a virtual world in cyberspace? Guy Debord committed suicide in 1994 at the age of 62. At the age of 23 he made a film with a dialogue seemingly organized on random principles. The title was Howlings in Favor of Sada. At one point the second voice says, "The perfection of suicide is in ambiguity." In the script this is followed by a stage direction, 5 minutes silence during which the screen remains dark. Zielinski, 7 items on the net. If one is to speculate, one might speculate on how the persistence of paradox encourages speculation, especially when it concerns intangible, imagined realms. Could a virtual asceticism be a cure for virtual obesity? We always have the switch-off option. Don't we? It is reassuring when things may not be divided equally that everything may be negotiable. I would hope that in the exponential growth of the virtual there will be room for a healthy negotiation with the physical before it is exponentially reduced to nothing. Everywhere humans move, we leave sweat, stains, urine, fecal matter. What we call construction and creation is the uprooting of living things, the massacre of minute creatures whose hearts throb with life. Lingus, Abuses, 1994. But if the material proves disappointing or oppressive and we find ourselves redundant, let us be grateful for the immaterial and learn to be completely contented within the virtual worlds of fantasy and imagination. Humanity has always invested heavily in any scheme that offers escape from the body. And why not? Material reality is such a mess. Hakim Bey, The Information War. Does the virtual represent a new and more potent opiate for the masses? A spiritual lesson? These societies that no longer expect anything from a future succession of things and have less and less faith in history, societies that bury themselves in the backdrop of their prospective technologies, behind their stockpiles of information and in the cellular networks of communication, and where time is finally obliterated in pure circulation, these generations may indeed never wake up, yet not be aware of it. Baudrillard, Pataphysics of Year 2000. Et in Virtua Ego. To be or not? Summary. It is still not out of season to write obituaries. Much as we might want to be rid of Baudrillard, the need to declare the death of still persists because the simulations of dead powers continue to plague us, even as actual genocides spread and right-wing hegemony takes over. Weinstein. This essay has looked at the implications of digital potential with regards art and has suggested that virtual reality is the marketing of this potential as representing both a new form and a new perception. Chapter 1, looked at the accumulation of the resources of memory and the problems of navigation and significance within a memory overload. Chapter 2 looked at the spread of signs away from nature and direct experience into media and indirect experience and suggested that language is moving towards a phanopia of mixed metaphor montage. Chapter 3 put forward the idea that art is less concerned with creation, as such, but exists as a focus for the negotiating and re-establishing of values within a system of control. Chapter 4 put forward a virtual administrative solution.